Okay, so now it is 11 a.m. Today, Saturday, 25th November. And friends, welcome you to this one more webinar on LODR, Regulation 29 and 30. This is our sixth the program on the SEBI LODR. So the idea is to discuss those regulations, thread by. And Regulation 29 and 30 is very important and very critical for any employee, company secretary, or a KMP, or a full-time company secretary who works for the listed company. And friends, to discuss this, we have the company secretary, Mr. Manikantha, Manikantha, who works for a company called Infosys, which is a very highly governed company, and they follow the best of the practice for the listed companies. So now, again, a privilege to be here, sir, and I'll introduce Mr. Manikantha. Mr. AGS Manikantha has almost a 1 decade experience working with Infosys. And of course, he has 2 decades of experience overall. And he has a very rich experience in the field of corporate governance, secretarial, treasury, finance, compliance, management, because he has done a lot of mergers and acquisition. And currently, he is working as a company secretary of the Infosys Limited and overseeing the total secretarial functions of the entire group. And he's also actively a member of FICCI Corporate Law Committee and also a member of CII Regulatory Affairs Committee, the member of an expert group of the Secretarial Standard Board of ICSI, and of course, various other forums also. He's also a regular speaker in ICSI and other professional circles. So we welcome you, sir, to this platform. So we have this Saturday's webinars, and we are doing it for more than a year and a half. And yeah, so basically, the idea is to share the knowledge. And we also have Mr. Bala, who's our regular panelist, and Mr. Bala comes with more than 4 decades of experience. He's a prolific writer in the various legal magazines, including SEBI and corporate laws. And he has worked with a multinational company called Foseco India. And he was a regular speaker at ICSI CCGRT. So Mr. Bala, welcome you. Now, without taking much time, now I'll request Mr. Bala to say some few words, and then Mr. Mani. Yeah.
Good morning to all of you. I have a great pleasure in welcoming you all for this particular seminar where we are sharing our knowledge on threadbare and the LODR regulation and class by class. And today we are going to discuss the class 29 and 30, and more so on 30. Because in the recent past, the LODR has been amended many times, bringing the importance of the disclosure and transparency. The whole class 30 dwells upon what are the various disclosures which has to be made, what are the time limit which has to be made. In addition to that, they have also brought in a lot of things in this, especially the various agreements where the company is not the party, but the people who are associated with the company entering the party, which is actually going to have a significant impact on the companies. This is where it is. And we have also seen in the past, the regulator has been using the word material events. If we say material event, what is material events? Earlier, it was actually left up to the board of directors to decide what is the material events. When you talk about the material events, it is relating to what is the impact it is going to have on a particular incident or particular case, whatever it is, whether it is significant or not significant, all those things has to be taken into consideration. Now, probably to set up this thing, the regulator has come up with a certain threshold limit in determination of the material regulation. And again, as we have seen in the preamble of the SEBI Act, it actually talks about protecting of the interest of the shareholders, and more so in case of the what you call small shareholders. So from that perspective, the more of the transparency, more of the disclosure is trusted upon. Information dissemination has been sought out. That is the reason all these regulations are undergoing changes. We have seen in the last 1.5 years or so, there have been sweeping changes, and there have been a lot of responsibility also on the independent directors, and more so, especially when they are resigning, why they are resigning, what is the reason, and that has to be disclosed, and in which company they are there, all those information which has to be disseminated, etc. Everything, all those things are all there. So I don't want to take much of our time on this because you are all well aware of it. We have the expert, Mr. Manikantha, who is coming from the Infosys. He was there earlier also in our one of the webinars. He has shared his knowledge with the rich experience. I would request Mr. Manikantha to share his brief introduction on this topic, and then we will proceed with that. As usual, you all can put up your queries and questions on the chat box. If anybody would like to speak or something, you can actually raise your hands. You are welcome to speak. Then we will have a more interactive session on this. Over to Mr. Manikantha. Welcome you, sir.
So before Mr. Mani starts, let me recognize, our senior partners, Ashwini Namda, who has almost 2 decades of experience, and she heads our LODR practice in Mehta and Mehta. So thank you, Ashwini. And we also recognize Mr. Jambunathan, who's our regular member and a very senior member, who's always a kind of a regular student, very young student in our webinars. Yeah. So Mr. Mani, over to you. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's a great privilege and honor to be part of this webinar. Thank you for having me here. Thanks a lot. I think, before I forget, thanks for your generous introduction as well. It has put a lot of onus on me to deliver and live up to that standard. Thank you so much. I think this today's session, or the topic of Regulation 29 and 30 is, I think both Mr. Mehta and Mr. Bala has mentioned. It is a very core of the SEBI listing regulations itself. And it is such a significant thing. If you have actually mastered in Regulation 29 and 30, then I think you are done. I think you will be able to function at any multinational company, and you will be able to live up to the requirements of the listing regulations. So what I will try and do today is I will try and pitch in as much as possible wherever I am required. But just to give you a disclaimer, all the views which I express during this session is my personal, and it is not my employer's views or expressions. So I want to put that on record for your records. Just to move ahead, just to touch upon what is Regulation 29 and 30, and just give you a context of what is 29 and 30. Now, I think the 29, as you all know, it mentions about the pre-intimations of any corporate events, corporate actions, which has a very significant and bearing impact on a retail shareholder or even for a normal shareholder. If they want to take a position in the market, then they will have a sufficient and a prior intimation. And because of that notification, the investor can either choose to be invested in the company or take a different position, or a new investor can come in. I think that's a very important aspect. And regulator wanted to give a level playing field for all the investors, right? So that's the thinking behind Regulation 29. And in the same spirit, if you go to the Regulation 30, Regulation 30 speaks about more of disclosures. And the context of why disclosures is to bring in the transparency and fairness. So one of the principle is how you function or what you do at the company should be known to the public, because they have invested, especially the investor committee, they have invested. And of course, it's not only limited to the investors. Now today, we are moving the concept from a shareholder to the stakeholder. So there are many people or many stakeholders who have interest in the company, and therefore everybody should know what is happening within the company. More so for the investors, because they have invested their money and they should know what is happening. So in that spirit of having a level playing field and having a transparency, SEBI has come out with this specific provision of Regulation 30. And if, as Mr. Bala was saying, the Regulation 30 has got a significant amendments in the recent past, which is in June 14, 2023, is when these amendments have come into play. And I think in today's session, you will hear more about it. What are those important points? It's nothing which is new. I'm sure most of you already know about these things, but there are many things which you have to focus on, because it's not the same old good days of how you are functioning. It is going to change. It is already changing, and there is no white and black in many of the places. So I think you need to focus a little bit more. I think Mr. Mehta also mentioned that this is the 6th session on this topic. So that actually gives you a relevance and importance of this topic. So there are many, I'll just touch upon a couple of points of what are the significant amendments which has come. Now, one is about the market rumors. Now, the market rumors is a very new concept in the Indian context. It was there. It is there in certain other jurisdictions, but it is very new to the Indian context. And if there is a rumor, then there is the top 100 or top 250. There is a gradual mechanism of when the companies have to actually confirm the rumor or deny the rumor. So that's one important thing. And the second thing is, of course, the materiality thresholds. The companies were taking a view, or they were taking their own materiality thresholds. So regulator thought there should be a materiality threshold which is equal to all the listed companies. So there is a 2 to 5% criteria. I think Nikhil will walk you through all those during the session. So that's the second important thing. The third one is about the disclosure timings. Earlier, we had only 30 minutes and 24 hours as two parameters for the disclosure, or the two extremes where you have to comply and make a disclosure. Now there is another element which is called 12 hours. And there are certain things which if it is emanating out of the company, then you have to disclose within 12 hours. And of course, there are new concepts which has come out with senior management personnel. If there's a change, then it has to be disclosed. There is also a reference to relevant employees, meaning in case if there is any material events which is happening, and if there are people in the organization know about it, how do they cascade and bring it to the key managerial personnel or whoever is in charge of making the disclosures? There is a very good description of that. And in fact, all the companies have to include those things. And then it moves on to the cybersecurity incidents. That's one of the significant things. Now, every board is actually seized of this matter of cybersecurity. And then if there is any incidents which happens, it has to be reported at the end of the quarter through your corporate governance report, etc. So I think those are some of the highlights of these amendments which has happened on June 14. So from June 14, there is a 1 month after that, July 14, there was a circular which was issued. It is more of a guidance note, which actually speaks about, there is 4 parts into that circular. It speaks about various things, including the events or the information which you have to provide for any specific event, what needs to be provided. That has been descriptively mentioned in those circular. It also speaks about the timing of which, when certain event, if it occurs, by what time you need to disclose. And there is a methodology which has been given of how do you calculate the percentages of 2 to 5%, and how do you arrive at what is your materiality threshold. I think there are so many things in that, so probably we'll go through this. Just one last point I would like to say, this Regulation 29 and 30 is like Bhagavad Gita, right? So each time when you go back, you will find some new thing. And more so if you have a context and if you have a transaction or any event in your hand, each time it pushes you to read the language. And each time when you read it with the context, it will give you a different meaning. So I think that's how we have to look at it, all our professionals, and try to enrich this knowledge. So thanks to all of you. I'll be around in case if you have questions.
So thank you, Mr. Mani. I think, you said it very correctly. Every time you read, and you have a different context in a mind, and you end up, doing some different interpretation. So yes, so it's like a Bhagavad Gita. And as you rightly said, probably mastering those 29 and 30, probably you have covered the whole LODR. So thank you, sir, giving the early brief introductions. I forgot to introduce my young partner, Nikhil Surdi, one of the youngest partner in Mehta and Mehta. He is from our Kolhapur branches. And we also have Alifia Sapatwala, he's also our senior partner in Mehta and Mehta. So without taking much time, now we almost have 160 plus, a participant. So we'll request, Nikhil to start, and probably Ashwini, Alifia, and probably Mr. Bala can, intervene whenever we have any point of discussions. Yeah, Nikhil, you can start.
The number itself shows the importance of this particular topic in the beginning. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Am I audible properly?
Yeah, very much.
Yeah. So good morning, all of you. Welcome to this sixth webinar of SEBI LODR. So starting with Regulation 29, which is a prior intimation with respect to the board meetings of a listed company. So the main purpose behind this Regulation 29 is to provide investors, shareholders, and now stakeholders with prompt information regarding the purpose of board meetings, empowering them to make more informed investment decisions. So that is the main motto behind the Regulation 29. So a listed entity before holding any board meeting, they have to report this kind of information with these kind of before in advance number of days. So first is financial results, quarterly, yearly, annually. So for this they have to give a advance notice on to the stock exchanges where they are listed, 5 days advance. So while calculating the 5 days, you have to exclude the date of intimation and the date of meeting. Then the proposal for buyback of securities, proposal for voluntary delisting. So for these events, B, C, and the D, E, F. For these events, you have to give a 2 working days advance notice, excluding date of intimation and the meeting. So other events are fundraising by way of public offer, right issue, ADR, GDR, foreign currency convertible bonds. So for these cases, if you are also conducting a postal ballot, EGM, so for that you have to intimate in that case. Declaration and recommendation of dividend, then proposal for declaration of bonus security. Hence, for all these events, you have to disclose the date of board meeting, the time of board meeting, well before the time. So stock exchanges have also introduced the XBRL system for this. So along with the PDF intimation, you have to disclose these informations through the XBRL mode. Can I move ahead?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just go to the previous slides. Those days. Just go further before. See, now it talks about the financial result quarterly, at least 5 days in advance, because, all those board meeting, it has to be, intimated to the stock exchange in advance. Proposal for the buyback, 2 days working in advance. And okay, so these are all very standard this thing. So basically intimation is, 2 days and 5 days. So when you say 5 days, effectively it is 7 days, because, we exclude the other 2 days, right? That's what,
Right.
So when you say 5 days, 5 clear days.
Right.
Yeah, correct. Both the days are excluded actually. The day of the intimation, the day of the board meeting is actually excluded.
So then, effectively for a conservative point of view, it should be 7 days, so that you exclude those other 2 days.
Right.
Yeah. Nikhil.
Yeah. So, firstly, I just brief about the Regulation 30. So there are 13 sub-regulation in Regulation 30. So I will just walk through the every single regulation, sub-regulation, and after that there are certain important sub-regulations which requires a more detailed discussion that we will have in the coming slides. So the sub-regulation 1 talks about every listed entity must disclose events information deemed material by the board of directors. So this is very general statement. Whatever a board seems that it is material, so they can disclose. Then sub-regulation 2, events specified in part A of Schedule 3. So para A, part A is considered automatically material. So you need not to have those material threshold to disclose it to the stock exchange. So they are deemed material and you have to disclose if you are conducting such kind of activities. Then disclosure for events specified in para B. So here the material guidelines that the new material thresholds have came in picture. So for that you have to see those material guidelines. We will see that in upcoming slides. So again the regulation 30 sub-regulation 4. So here the criteria includes the potential discontinuing or alteration of publicly available information, significant market reaction, and the specific value threshold. So that is included in sub-regulation 4. So sub-regulation 2 part sub-regulation 4 part 2 speaks about the every listed entity have to have a materiality policy which should be disclosed on the website. So what all points should be there in the material policy are there in coming slides. So you have to also authorize a key managerial person, one or more, to the employees will communicate the material information to this key managerial person, and they are authorized to further dissemination to the stock exchange. So they will determine materiality and they will further disseminate to the stock exchange. Right. So moving forward, so regulation 30 sub-regulation 6 is talks about material events must be disclosed within the specified timelines. So specified timelines means the SEBI has given the specific circular with regards to this. So for every event, there is a separate timeline and you have to disclose those information within those timelines. We will also discuss those timelines. Then sub-regulation 7 talks about continuous disclosure on material developments are required until the event is resolved. So you have to disclose the information continuously until the event is closed or it is resolved. So sub-regulation 8 talks about all events disclosed to the stock exchange must be hosted on entity's website minimum for 5 years as per archival policy. So it should be go as per the archival policy of the company. If it is more stringent, you have to keep it for more years, or the minimum 5 years is there in the LODR. Then the sub-regulation 9 material information or material events or information related to subsidiaries, which are material for listed company. So again, if listed entity is not part of any event or agreement, but if its subsidiary is a part of that event, so and if it is material for the listed company, again that is important, then that has to be disclosed to the stock exchange.
This slides too, when you say continuous disclosure on a material development are required until the event is resolved. So now, how do we give this example? For example, now there is a so if my company is exporting somewhere in Ukraine and the war is on, okay, so which is going to be badly affecting the functioning of the company or a top line or a bottom line. It means this things will remain till the war is over, something like this, Mr. Bala. Yeah.
You see, any contract or agreement, whatever you entered, Before entering it, you actually estimate this is what going to be, this is the thing. Suppose for over a period of 12 months, this is what you are going to attain. But what happened, the first 3 months, you do it only 20%. Next 3 months, you do it only 40%. The remaining 60% is going to come in the later part of the year. So what happens is, if the people look at it and proportionately, since you have not achieved it, probably, the impact you should actually disclose to the stock exchange. Yes, this event is definitely going to take place, but it is going to take place only in the later part of the year, not in this. So this sort of the updation will be required. That is number one. Number two is that even if we are entering the agreement or contract, there are any modifications subsequently which has actually happened, which is affecting the impact of the working, etc., which also need to be informed. So when you are saying continuous disclosure means it is with reference to the particular event, as it keep on progressing, what is the upsides and downside modification, etc., that is what it is required to be informed here.
Mr. Bala, company like Infosys has thousands of contract, okay. So some deviation in some contract, of course, you have those materiality of 2% and 3%. But then, this is our commercial wisdom of the company. If I have to keep a track, then one of my secretary department and company like Infosys or a Hindustan Lever, they have to keep on tracking those. I don't know. I mean, this is I think over regulations according to me. Yeah.
I think we can hear from Mani.
Yeah. So without referring to the examples of Infosys and Hindustan,
Sorry.
touch upon. No, I'm very particular to touch upon the subject rather than the example. No,
Yeah.
so what I was trying to give you an example is, let's say if there is an M&A. In an M&A, so both the parties agree to get into an agreement for the takeover or the merger, right? So in that scenario, it is a material event which has to be disclosed. Now you have to disclose. Once you disclose it, it is not that every aspect of the mergers, what you have made, what you have entering into is disclosed to the market. There is a specific requirement of what has to be disclosed. Probably those are some of the things which you would have disclosed. But again, the merger is subject to so many other conditions, warranties, closing conditions, etc. And also the cash has to be given it, right? So unless and until you transfer the cash, the merger is still not completed. Now, therefore, those are all material developments which happens. And in certain scenarios, the things what you had agreed in the beginning may also take a different shape or a different turn. So therefore, those are all material events which are happening from the point of when you had disclosed it earlier. Therefore, whatever has happened materially developed from a disclosure what you have earlier made has to be refreshed or updated in the public domain and to the stock exchange. So therefore, you need to make, combining all this, you need to make another disclosure to say that, okay, these are some of the developments which has happened in continuation to our previous disclosure which has been made. And this is where we stand. So if you make an other disclosure, probably that is a final one because you would have completed the payout of cash and you would have agreed to all of that and the shares would have come to you. So I think this is how I would like to look at it with an example.
So company like, going back to my previous example, like, L&T, for example, constructing some road dams, in Ukraine, and suddenly there is a war. Now, see, war is progressing, and it getting severe, and probably now maybe, it is slowing down. So till, those events gets over, you mean to say, I have to keep on updating, look, I have not started, or the project is hold, and, again, with some materiality of 2-3%, So,
exactly. So I think, let's say if you have won a contract, taking your example, if you have won a contract to construct a road or whatever in that specific geography, and if you are executing it, it is a normal course of business. It is happening, it is executing the way it is happening. Right. But let's say if there is a force majeure thing happens, like the war breakout, or if it is in a factory atmosphere, if there is a fire which happens, then you have to naturally give a disclosure. So that is one on an event basis. But just to go back to your continuous disclosure point, let's say if you have won 1,000 crores worth of contract, and
Yeah.
there is a war which breaks out, and because of which the 1,000 crores contract can significantly come down, or probably it can come to zero as well, right? So therefore, it is a very important decision, because when you have made a disclosure at the first point, the investor has thought that you will be making a revenue of 1,000 crores in the duration, and suddenly this thing has happened, right? So if this thing has happened, so investor doesn't have a knowledge about what has happened significantly, which is impacting your earlier disclosure which has been made. So therefore, it warrants for an updation of that, or a updation of the earlier disclosure which you have made, which is actually called a continual disclosure.
But so it is only a negative side or even a positive side also? Like I've seen some of the irrespective of, okay. So,
yeah, whether it is up or down doesn't matter, positive news or a negative news. If you believe that it is a significant development, the board or the company has an obligation to update it.
So tomorrow,
I think as Nikhil also mentioned in one of the previous slides, so there are few people who have been authorized. In fact, the whole disclosure has to be, the whole disclosure regime has to be seen by the board. And the way how the board does it is through the policy of they say that this is how the determination of materiality will happen. This is how the disclosures will be made. In that, the board is not seeing the affairs of the company on a day-to-day basis. So therefore, it will entrust on certain one or many key managerial personnel to ascertain if there are any events which happens like this and make a disclosure. So it is an authorization which is already given by a board to entrust the charge and an obligation with the key managerial personnel to assess if there are some of the things which has happened. It has to be updated, and that's in the same spirit which I also mentioned in the opening remarks of these relevant employees. Right now, let's say if you have a person in Russia, in your example, if something is happening over there, you may, at the corporate or at the board level, you may not know what is happening. So therefore, the relevant employee, the person who is interested over there becomes a relevant employee, and he has an obligation to cascade this information to you, who is a KMP, to make that determination. And when a KMP makes a determination, yes, this is a significant change, then the disclosure comes into play.
So if my company is into defense, and by virtue of war, my sale is going to go great, something like this. So even the positive side also, probably I need to continuously update those things on my website. That's what?
Yeah. See, Atul, it is like this. Anything, any development which is going to affect either way, positively or negatively, with reference to the performance of the company, with reference to the operations of the company, which is definitely going to impact. That you need to actually disclose in any case. That is one thing, because based on this, what is going to happen is your price sensitive will catch up in the market, either upside or downside. That is how the capital market becomes. That is the investors are taking a decision.
But sir, I'm in an industry where I'm supposed to keep certain business secret also. So I don't know. Then of course these are all very subjectives. But
no business secrets in the sense, you see, let us discuss. Anything ultimately it comes to the board, and board gives a decision. Then as per the regulation, within 30 minutes, whatever the decision it is to be disclosed to the public, it becomes the public domain.
Right.
So long as the event is not finalized, it remains secret.
Okay.
The moment the event is finalized, you are supposed to disseminate the information. Stage of discussions, agreement, concurrence, and willingness, acceptance, etc. Once it is decided, when it is the board actually discusses, it take a decision, yes, then it comes to the public, no?
I would like to add a couple of points.
Yes.
One is on the proprietary information, right? So if it is a proprietary information, or if it is, let's say, if it is a national security or things like that, you have to be very careful of what you are making the disclosure. And also the confidentiality part of it. Let's say if you enter into an agreement with some party, it's not necessary that you may have to compulsorily mention the other party's name. The investor has to take a call. He should know that you have won the contract, right? And whether by virtue of that, whether your revenue increases, decreases, what is your profitability is what is concerned about it. Now, how much to make the disclosure of a other party is something to the commercial call which you have to take. So I think it's a practical scenario of how do you protect your proprietary information as well. I think that's the judgment which has to be used by every person or a KMP. So I think that's where I would like to rest this, right?
Thank you. I think I got my all clarity. Thank you. Yeah, Nikhil, you can start.
Yeah. So sub-regulation 10 talks about the adequate replies to the queries raised by the stock exchange. So that has to be replied in the given time. Then again, this is important sub-regulation, sub-regulation 11, top 100 and 250 entities must promptly confirm and deny, clarify reported events in the mainstream media. So this regulation will be discussed in brief in coming slides. Then the adequate disclosures are required for events information available with the listed entity not covered by Schedule 3 Para A or B of Part A if those events have material effect. So this is something inclusive and
yeah. So, sir, no, sorry, no, I'm getting a lot of thoughts. Now, see, nowadays, in last 2-3 days, we have a lot of newspaper carrying that, there are some new virus are happening in China, and that, going to be, spreading and blah, blah, blah. And so we have some media interaction where it says, so ABC company is going to get benefited, Now, how do you, as a company, if I'm a company secretary of that particular pharma company, which makes some vaccines and all, so suddenly, my price, shot up by 10% or 20%. So anyway, so ultimately, I'm just referring to the second slide, which says, you have to promptly confirm, deny, or clarify. So unless and until the stock exchange writes to me, then only I have to clarify, or by just reading in the newspaper or some media paper carries something that look ABC company is going to get benefited. So
Nikhil has a slide on that. Nikhil
Sorry?
has a slide on that. Nikhil has a slide on that. But just to your point on, first of all, there should be a specific reference. It can't be generic. If something happens somewhere and you get benefited, there is no rumor on your company. How is it your company? Generally, it can benefit the pharma industry, but there is nothing to do. How can you confirm or deny of that news? But if the expectation or the expectation by this amendment is to have, if there is a specific rumor which is attached to your company, then it has to be confirmed. And I think you also asked whether only if it is asked by the stock exchanges. It is not so. If you see the regulations, it is mandatory. You need to do it now. And there is a gradual approach. The September 30th, there was a circular which actually has given a gradual approach of how the companies have to do it, which companies have to do it. So top 100 companies have to start confirming or denying from February 1st, 2024. And I think August 1st, 2024 for top 250 companies. And for rest of the companies, they have still not mentioned anything, but I think this is a phase. After that, it will be mentioned to everybody.
So proactively also, so the secretary department has to be so proactive because see, I have international operations. I have some 20-30 subsidiary across world. And suddenly there is a scrap in my share price, and then everybody is looking into you. Look, what has happened, because somewhere in some news channel, CNBC, they carried that because of this, this company is going to get benefited, and suddenly there is a rush for buying a share of that company. So you mean to say the company also has to proactively, intimate to the stock exchange, look, this news are not correct and blah blah blah.
No,
See,
so if there is a if there is a rumor which is not correct, or if there is nothing which can be associated with the company, even then that's where the wording says you have to either confirm or deny it, right? So you have an obligation either way.
see,
So sorry, please go ahead.
no, you please complete. I'll say that.
No, so I was just saying that that's an obligation, and therefore you need to definitely do it. And also the stock exchanges, the way they function, they have a dedicated surveillance department as well. They will monitor the difference in the stock price, and if there is, they will also look at it from a manipulation standpoint as well. And if they see any manipulation of the stock price, definitely they will come after. First of all, they will seek a clarification from the companies to ascertain if there is any disclosure which is due to be made. Second, they will also go after if there is a suspicious trading. If happens, there is a you are aware of the entire insider trading gamut which is picking up right now. It's a very different regime altogether right now. So there are enough checks and balances in the system to counter those kind of manipulations.
See, earlier to this amendment, the companies were able to simply say, we have nothing to comment. But now, this particular regulation says you cannot get away saying that we have nothing to comment. Here, either you have to confirm, yes, it is true, or you have to deny, no, it is not true, or you have to give the clarification of the matter. That is what the regulation has actually come. Which means, as you rightly put, that you have some 20 subsidiaries across the globe, etc., and other thing and all. It may be in the different geographical, it will be different nation, it will be in even the different languages. We do not know. By sitting here, I will not be able to read what is coming in the Spanish language or French language. If the local newspaper of the French language, Spanish language, pointing out specifically to your company, not in general. If that is the case, the mechanism should be there in the company to have tracking of those news items. Because Nikhil is actually going to talk what is the mainstream, etc., and other thing and all, what they have spelled out actually. So that when company need to put up a system in place for tracking the market rumor and appropriately address it. That is why first 100 companies are brought in first, and it is going to be 250 later. It is going to be gradually increasing, because the whole idea is to have a setup in place to track the market rumor, because all of a sudden everybody cannot do. That is why the time is required. So that is where this actually comes into the place. So naturally, it is a great amount of the secretarial department, even the other departments, to track the things and give the feedback, and accordingly, the top management has to take a call, and they'll have to actually either confirm, deny, or clarify.
Yeah, it's a very onerous, and it has a larger implication. This is something which everybody is trying to grapple with, and we really don't know how do we do this. I think SEBI also recognized it, so they have constituted an industry standards forum. Right? So industry standards forum under the chairmanship of Mr. K.V. Kama. So that's the committee which has been constituted. Hopefully they are coming out with some standards to say that what are some of the things which the company has to do while implementing these things.
Yeah, Nikhil. Yeah, we can start.
Okay. So the last sub-regulation talks about in information or information if required by the regulatory, statutory enforcement or judicial authorities. So unless if it is prohibited by the judicial authority, you have to disclose to the stock exchange. I'm just overviewing the regulation 30 and the things we are going to discuss. First of all, the disclosure of material events and information. So first of all, para A of part A, which is deemed material events, you need not to consider any test for the materiality. You have to just disclose it. Then the test for the motility, which is given in Regulation 30, Sub-Regulation 4. And those tests has to be done for the para B of Part A. Then there are some other events which are material, which is part of Para C. Then there are intimation timelines given by the SEBI. Then there are material information about subsidiaries that has to be disclosed. Then rumors we are going to discuss in the upcoming slides. Then there are 21 events in Para A of Part A, and there are 13 events in Para B of Part A. Then for this Regulation 30, for other regulations, SEBI came with one SOP of penalty. So there is a absolute penalty which defines like a 1,000 per day, 2,000 per day, 5,000 per day. So those penalty are defined, but for Regulation 30, there is no penalty which is defined under that SOP. So it should be adjudicated by the SEBI, and the adjudication will be done as per the Securities Contract Regulation Act 1956. The penalties are 1 lakh per day, or it can be a maximum up to 1 crore. So our first discussion about this is newly introduced regulation 30A, which talks about the agreements which needs to be disclosed by the listed entity to the stock exchanges. So all the shareholders, promoters, promoter group, entity, related parties, directors, key managerial person, and the employees of listed entity must inform the listed entity about specific agreements. Then this is an important point, clause 5A of Para A of Part A, Schedule 3, agreements impacting management or control. There are two things while considering the disclosure of agreements to stock exchange. First is agreements if they are impacting management or control, and the second is agreement other than those in normal course of business imposing restriction or creation of a liability.
So a restructuring of shareholdings in a family, would it amount to be will fall into this category?
Yeah.
So the father has given to a daughter or a brother or a son, which are the promoters. So inter se promoters, any agreement will fall into this.
Yes, because it is impacting management, the control over the listed entity. So if you see after this amendment, many listed entity who has the family arrangement between them, so they have disclosed their very old agreements of 90s. So they have disclosed those agreements to the stock exchanges.
So I have categorized, there are 5, 10 promoters for my company, and there are some internal changes. Or some shares been bought and sold by the internal promoters. By father, it is given it to the daughter. So whether this amounts to prima facie, it looks like yes, you are supposed to, but effectively there are no changes.
No, so sorry, I'll just intervene. So if it is a one-off transfer or a gift, if they want to give it to somebody, then I don't think you have to make a disclosure. But however, the prior disclosure, but the disclosure will definitely happen after the event after the event is completed. Because under the insider trading regulations and also under the SAST regulations, you have to make the disclosures of what has been transferred from you to whomever you have transferred it, right? So I think those information will be made public. But if it is a family settlement kind of a arrangement, then it has a bearing impact on the normal functioning of the company. Sometimes it can also translate it to who will be the CEO of the company or who can be the chairman of the company. So that's actually disturbing the way the functioning of the company is actually happening on a day-to-day basis. So there is an obligation to make a disclosure.
Yeah.
Can I go ahead?
Yeah, please.
So time has been given in the regulation. So parties involved in the specified agreement must inform to the listed entity within 2 working days of entering such agreement. So here the regulator don't want to waste time to get that information disseminated not properly. So it has to be informed to the listed entity within 2 working days, and further listed entity will inform to the stock exchange. So transparency for existing agreements. For agreements existing as on date of the notification, parties must inform the listed entity about the agreements in which listed entity is not party. Again, clause 5A talks about if it is affecting management or control, even though listed entity is not party to that agreement, some other family persons or promoters are part of that agreement. So that has to be informed to the company. The listed entity must disclose all such existing agreements to the stock exchange on its website within the timeline specified by the board. So there is another thing like annual reporting requirement. So there are certain points which we have to disclose in the annual report. So first you have to disclose the silent features of these agreements. You have to provide link to the web page where complete details of agreement are available. The disclosure is to be made in the annual report. Either if this amendment came with effect from 15 July, so some of companies already completed their AGM and some are yet to, but so they have given option. You can disclose in this annual report or the annual report for the 23-24. So this is a diagram where agreements require disclosure. So if it is in ordinary course of business and it is impacting company's control management, then you have to disclose to the stock exchange and disclosure in annual report. It is in ordinary course of business, but it is not impacting control of the listed entity. Disclosure not required. If it is not in ordinary course of business, then it has to be disclosed in any case, and annual report disclosure is also required. So again, the important amendment and the important sub-regulation of regulation 30. So test for determination of material events. So there were previously there were A, B, C sub points in this sub-regulation, but they have the right of board of directors. They have given the exact material threshold. Previously board of directors can decide on their own what should be my percentage, where do I consider this is material, this is not material. But now the SEBI has given the exact percentage. So there are two guidelines. First is qualitative and second is quantitative. So qualitative says the omission of an event or information which is likely to result discontinuity or alteration of event or information already available publicly. So if there is any discontinuity and if alteration in the information, you have to disclose. Then again, omission of such information likely to result in significant market reaction if said omission came to light a later date. So that has to be disclosed. And point C talks about, which is amendment. So you have to consider the value or expected impact in terms of value exceeds the lower of following: 2% of turnover, 2% of net worth, and 5% of average absolute value of PAT. So all these figures you have to consider the last audited consolidated balance sheet, except for the absolute value of PAT you have to consider for the three consolidated financial statement. So here the word absolute is more important. So how you will calculate the average absolute value? So in case if my 21 PAT 10 crores, 22 6 crores, and if there is a loss of 2 crores in 23, so you will not consider 2 as a minus, so you have to consider the absolute 2. So it will be like 10 plus 6 plus 2, so that comes to 18. So 18 crore divided by 3, which is an average 3 years, and you have to take 5% of that, so it will come around 30 lakhs. So that is your material threshold for that financial year. So if you have event in 23 24, so you will consider the figures of 22 23, and for that year you have to consider threshold as a 30 lakhs.
So, Mehta, I would like to draw your attention to this qualitative thresholds. I think the examples which you give, if you read that in this context, then I think it's very clear. So if there is an information, and if it is changing if it is discontinuing or altering that event, right? So then what event, how to determine this, whether it is significant or not, then you will come to the right hand side to see of whether it is falling into whichever is lower of these three thresholds. Then if you see that if there is an impact, then you have an obligation to make the disclosure. So I think both point A and point B on the left-hand side, which you see on the qualitative thresholds, actually underscores the requirement of continued disclosure.
Understood.
Yeah. And then point D, if even the material threshold does not cross, then board have discretion, and they have the judgment that if they considered it as a significant material, they can disclose to the stock exchange. So what all amendments you need to incorporate in the materiality policy by every listed entity? So as per the LODR regulation, you have to have a material policy for a determination of materiality. Then there is a new amendment about the relevant employees. So relevant employees is not defined in that regulation, but relevant employees can be those depending upon the nature of events may diverse and may arise anywhere within the listed entity, the HOD of all departments. So this is not a definition given under the regulation, but they are the persons who have the information about the day-to-day activities, and they have to communicate that information to the authorized person, that is a key manager person or any authorized person, and they will decide if it is a material. So relevant employee is a person who is working in an organization and who has that definition, that information in his hand. So also some of the companies are also taking decision like their designated person are defined as a relevant employees, considering some of the policies of listed entity, because designated person they are deemed to have unpublished price sensitive information, so they can also be defined as a relevant employees here.
Okay. So, okay, now I have a question here. Suppose, again, I'm giving an example of a Larsen Tobro. Now, they also have a L&T Finance as a subsidiary company. Now, tomorrow, anything goes wrong in that L&T Finance, which is also going to affect, my consolidation of those, some percentage, say more than 2%. So, is it that, have to be intimating to the stock exchange on the basis of the information which the L&T Finance has given, Mr. Mani?
Yeah. So if it is impacting your standalone of identity by virtue of that problem which is happening in L&T finance, then obviously you have to make the disclosure. So nothing has changed from the concept or the principle. It was the same principle earlier as well. So now it is only the thresholds which has been introduced. So from a principle standpoint, you are supposed to make the disclosure even at that point of time if it was significant impact which can happen on your financials of a listed entity. So it continues the way it is.
So standalone, I'm not been affected to my company, but if I do those consolidations, there is somewhere some percentage, is getting affected on my top line and bottom line.
That percentage is what now they have defined, because that's the area where there was no uniformity. People used to take the call of whatever they feel that is a material. That's the plug hole which has been fixed right now.
So
Atul,
anything
Atul, in any case, the disclosure was actually called for earlier. It was not called for earlier. But only thing is it was left to the management to decide whether it is materially impacting or materially impacting, take their own decision.
Exactly.
Now what has happened, as Mani has put it correctly, now the regulator, after going through the practices followed by many companies, they have come back, there is no uniformity. Different people are interpreting differently things. That is why they are brought in the threshold of 2%, 5%. You have to apply this threshold limits, and accordingly you have to report. That is where they have come actually. Because now what happens is the test is to be applied, whether it is really material or not material. If it is falling under materiality, you have to report. That is the only change which has taken place in this. Otherwise, anyway, disclosure was called earlier. It was left to the company earlier. Now it is subject to the test which is specified by the norms given by the regulator.
So I have another questions. Like, you have a many large NBFC which is listed on a stock exchange. Now, it is very likely that, some RBI, of course, that RBI inspection is a very regular, they do it, once in a 2 years or once in a year or once in a 3 years. Now, somewhere after, those inspections, there are some observations being done by the, which has propped up from those, inspections. Now, a company also has replied. So now my question here is, now, is it that, company has to intimate immediately that, look, these are the observation by the RBI? Because, somewhere there is a time which, company also has to reply to those. And this is, I don't know how this can get fitted in this regulation.
I think it is specified in line item 19 or 20 under scheme of 3 para A. So we'll come to that. I think when we touch upon that subject, probably we should speak about it, because just an interaction or a documentation calling for an information or having a due process of replying to the findings may not be a reportable event. So there are certain things which we may want to take care. So we'll go with.
Okay.
Yeah. So trigger point for disclosure of material events. So first of all, in Schedule 3, there are certain events which you have to report within 30 minutes after conclusion of board meeting. So after that, 12 hours from occurrence of event or information which if it is emanates from within the listed entity, and if it is not emanate from within the listed entity, then for that you have 24 hours. So some of the examples are here. So if we consider the resignation of director KMP, so that is coming from a third party for a listed entity. They are the employees, they are within the organization, but they are the third parties. It is their decision. It is not discretion of a listed entity. If you are appointing a director or KMP, then it is coming from the listed entity. It's a discretion of the listed entity, and it has to be reported in 12 hours. So with respect to verification of rumors. So that is under regulation 30, sub-regulation 11. So top 100 entities with effect from February 1st, 2024. Thereafter, 250 top listed entity with effect from August 1, 24 shall confirm, deny, or clarify any reported event or information in mainstream media which is not in general nature and which indicates that rumors of impending specific material event or information in terms of provision of this regulation uh, of this regulation are circulating amongst the investing public as soon as reasonably possible and not later than 24 hours from the reporting of the information. So going forward, so first of all, this is applicable for top 100 and 250. So the with effect from date is given there. So these are the entities who are getting affected as of now. And once it is applicable, it is always applicable as per regulation 3, sub-regulation 2 of LODR. Then what are the reportable events? So first, rumors of specific impending material events or information under regulation 30, not in general nature, pertains directly to the listed entity and indicates of leakage of unpublished price sensitive information. Then the mainstream media definition is given under the regulation. So you don't need to somebody have reported this on this platform, this. So the LODR has given the specific channels, specific mainstreams. You will consider them as a mainstream media. Then only you have to report to the stock exchange that this is a wrong, this is a right, and then you have to clarify. So where something is reported, so that is on mainstream media. So what is the listed entity's obligation? So they have to it has to confirm, deny, or clarify, and the time given is 24 hours from reporting of that information by that mainstream media. So the newspaper registered with the Registrar of Newspaper of India, then the news channels, the content published by Publisher News, and current affair content as defined under Information Technology Act. Then newspaper or news channels or news or current affair content similarly registered or permitted or regulated as the case may be in justification outside India, jurisdiction outside India.
Nikhil, somebody has actually put up a question relating to this. Some XYZ influencer puts something on the internet regarding an ABC company, and such information is not in the company's knowledge at all. The CS of the company or her team have not come across this information at all.
Social media is out of this, Mr. Babu.
Social media is out of this. Okay.
Social media is not a mainstream media.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So now we are moving forward with Schedule 3. So we are done with Regulation 29 and 30. So which is say Regulation 30 and 20 goes with Regulation 30 specifically goes with Schedule 3. So there are specific 21 events which has to be reported. So first is acquisition, scheme of arrangement, sale, disposal of unit, division wholly, substantially. Then again this sale of stake in associate company, which is again newly introduced. Then the definition of acquisition, which is clearly defined, as you have to meet those conditions. So acquisition defined as acquiring control, whether directly or indirectly, or acquiring shares or voting rights of company. So listed entity holding shares or voting rights aggregating 5% or more, change in holding exceeding 2% from the last disclosure, cost of acquisition exceeding the specified threshold. So this is also aligned with the SaaS regulation, where the 2% and 5% criteria is also there in the Decoding regulations. Then sale or disposal of subsidiary, sale of stake in the associate company. So additional clarification undertake. So this is also aligned with the section 180 subsection 1 subclause C, where if you are substantially selling undertaking, so that has to be reported to the stock exchange. So timeline mentioned in the circular given by the SEBI, I guess that is dated 13th July. It is 12 hours. So sub-regulations speak about issuance of if you are issuing forfeiture of security, you're doing split consolidation of shares, buyback of securities, any restriction on transferability of securities. So these kind of events has to be reported within 12 hours. Then again, the new rating, it's something which is newly introduced. Previously it was just a revision of rating. If company has gone through the revision of ratings, and that had to be disclosed. But now new ratings, if you are obtaining new ratings, so that has to be disclosed within 24 hours of obtaining the revision. So there are certain events which has to be disclosed within 30 minutes from the conclusion of board meeting. So now stock exchange has also mandated to write the conclusion time of the board meeting in the stock exchange intimation. So that can be considered very crucial and important. So within 30 minutes you have to consider the so these are the events: dividend, cancellation of dividend, buyback of securities, fundraising, capital increase, reissue of forfeiture of shares, then alteration of capitals. So financial results are there, and the voluntary delisting. So these are the events you have to disclose within 30 minutes.
I just want to intervene there. If you see the circular on 13th July, after the table, there is an asterisk which has been given for the outcome of board meeting within 30 minutes, which means that the way it is described, it looks like whatever transactions or whatever decisions has been taken by the board, irrespective of whether that was required to be considered by board or not. But if you have taken it to the board for whatever reason, then the time limit is 30 minutes from the end of the board meeting, and it is not 24 hours or 12 hours. That's how the wording is there. So I think there is a lot of gray area. There are two schools of thought. One school of thought is only the matters which are reserved for the board. If those are resolved, then that has to be intimated within 30 minutes, but others within 24 or 12 hours. But there is another school of thought which says that whatever you take to the board, if it is approved, then you have to mandatorily disclose within 30 minutes.
I think the 30 minutes seems to be a realistic approach, because any matter which is come onto the board, then it's stand resolved. I think it is required to be reported according to me. We cannot apply that 24 hours.
Now I will give you a practical issue. Let's say if it is an M&A, in an M&A, the board has approved to sign or enter into an agreement with the other party. Now, how will you deal with it? Because the agreement has to be signed by the counterparty also. Now, if you take the board approval as a incident, and if you try and make a disclosure within 30 minutes, what happens in case if there is a other party doesn't sign it?
I will update. That's all. Because any updates, what else I can do? Because the whole idea is when the board approves, board would have definitely gone through and discussed. They cannot take the abrupt decision on one side. They would have definitely discussed the other party, etc., work out the modality, and finally they would have put up the board to the matter, according to me.
No,
Abruptly,
that's how
they
the
cannot take
commercial
a
transaction.
decision
That's
on
how
their
the
own. Yeah.
That's how the commercial transaction happens. Whenever you take a proposal to the board, obviously you will have the other side agreeing to it. Then you will take it, right?
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, it can still potentially, technically, it cannot be signed by the other party, right? Because they still have a right to not sign. Another point to remember from a principal standpoint, the earlier stock exchange circular said that any disclosure, if you are making, it has to be on the basis of completeness and concreteness. Now, in this scenario, the concreteness has not yet happened, and the completeness has also not yet happened. Right. I think that is the point which I was trying to give you as an example, that there is a dilemma of whether you have to make it within 30 minutes or within 24 hours. So probably we should wait for this industry standards forum to guide us.
Yeah.
Someone has
So,
also raised the same question here. I think the decision is acquisition taken by the board, whether it is 30 minutes or 2 hours, just now what we discussed.
Oh, okay.
yeah. So, the subpoint of subpoint 5 of part para A, so it aligns with the regulation 30A, which is newly introduced. So we have discussed this point, scope of what should be a scope of agreements, the agreements that are binding and not in normal course of business, those has to be disclosed. So what can be the categories of agreement? Shareholder agreement, joint venture agreement, family settlement agreement, agreement, treaties, contract with media companies. Those has to be disclosed. So entities involved, agreement involving shareholder, promoter group entities, related parties, directors, key manager person, and the employees of the listed entity, or its holding subsidiary or associate company. So these entities can be involved in the agreement, even though if the listed entity is not party, and if it is affecting a listed entity, the operation of listed entity, those has to be disclosed to the stock exchange. So there is a disclosure obligation, agreements affecting management or control. So those has to be disclosed. Then there is a rescission, amendment, and alteration to those agreements. So some of the terms and conditions, and there are certain amendments which again affect to the control of management. Those has to be those amendments has to be disclosed.
So Nikhil, we have Mr. Mahindra Dutia wants to ask something. Yeah, Mr. Mahindra, you can unmute yourself and ask question. Yeah. Mr. Mahindra, you are there?
Yeah, I am here. Good afternoon, all. Yeah. So my question is that if there are two listed entities, say entity A and B, both are listed, there is an agreement between both the entities that one of the unit of A is being sold out to entity B. So in that case, say there is a meeting of A being conducted today, wherein this particular, although the sale of entity has already been decided upon, that it is final, only the agreement is required to be signed. In the meeting of A, the board has given the approval of signing that agreement, and in that case, it has to be reported to the stock exchanges. Although the agreement is not signed, but it has to be reported to the stock exchange that yes, decision has been taken and the agreement is yet to be signed. And also the decision of board of directors of listed entity B is yet to, they are yet to make the decision on this, and it may, we don't know, it may change also. So that way it has to be reported to the stock exchange. So my question is, if the entity B holds their board meeting, say tomorrow, then it will also affect them. So how are they going to report today when listed entity A is making that particular reporting to the stock exchange.
Yeah, I think this is exactly the same point which I was mentioning.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. So I think I don't have a clear answer here because the way,
right.
as I was mentioning, the circular seems to say that it has to be disclosed within 30 minutes from the time the board has approved it.
Correct.
Right. So that is what the law mentions about it. There is no greater clarity, but I can give you the practical approach. Probably you should schedule the meetings within 30 minutes and then take an approval, right? So probably that's one
Both
way.
the company has to conduct the meeting on the same day and around the same time.
Yes.
So that both can make the disclosure to the stock exchange.
Correct. That's only a
Right.
practical approach. It's not a
Correct.
It's not a legal answer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, as Mani puts it correctly, the way regulation wording which are actually framed, it has to be reported.
Yes.
But as he puts it correctly, yes, because there are two parties are involved, the other party always have a chance of changing his mind, either to not to accept, either to modify, either to come up with something. That always the possibility is there actually. So in which case we go by the regulation, if we report it, probably again the updation has to be made subsequently.
No, so sorry, Bala, I would refer to that because of two reasons. One is there is no completeness on that point because obviously the other person has to sign. The event is actually occurred only after signing, right? So that is point number one. Point number two, if you make a pre-disclosure, prior disclosure, even without the information has happened or concretize the whole event, then you are actually creating a false market, which is actually a bigger problem, right? If you are creating a false market and tomorrow for whatever reason, if the other party doesn't sign it, then the market.
I agree with you. People will laugh at us.
Reacted.
People will laugh at the company. What is happening? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I think we have to. I think that's why there is a lot of thinking which has to happen before we take a call of when to make a disclosure, what needs to be done. And in fact, that's why I said it's like Bhagavad Gita. Every time you read, you get a different
That is
perspective.
right. That's right. I agree.
Also, the moment you have a context, you read it, you will get a different perspective.
Yeah, very correct.
Yeah.
Nikhil, you can move. Yeah.
So we were discussing about the agreements which are entered by some other party or the listed entity, which is affecting a listed entity. So there is an exemption for normal course of business. Agreements entered into normal course of business exempted unless they impact management or control. If it is impacts management or the control of the listed entity, that those has to be disclosed to the stock exchange. So timeline has been given 12 hours for agreements where listed entity is party, 24 hours for the agreements where listed entity is not party.
There is one question on the chat asking if a decision is taken on a circular resolution, whether it is 30 minutes or 24 hours or 12 hours. I think the restriction is only on the board meeting. So the 30 minutes mentions more about the board meeting. So therefore, if you have passed a matter on the circular resolution, then it can go to 12 hours or 24 hours. And this is my personal view.
So see, many circular resolution has to be noted, it has to be rectified, and so when you say the MD resign, and you circulate, for the approval or for a noting, so then the moment he resigned, is it that company secretary has to intimate to the stock exchange, or because somewhere because he's an employee, managing directors is an employee. So it has to be somewhere, it has to be approved or noted, or I don't know. I mean, so those are the practical difficulties. So how do you take a stand now?
I think there is one specific item on
Yeah.
that. Why don't we park that and come back?
Yeah. Okay, sir. Okay.
So subclause 6 of part A, which talks about the fraud and defaults. So what are the reporting obligations? So instances of fraud, default, legal issues involving the listed entity, its key stakeholders or subsidiaries must be promptly reported. Categories of events, there are two categories for fraud and defaults. So in case like cash credit default occurs if outstanding balance exceeds the sanction limit or the drawing power of continuously over 30 days. So this is also part of subclause 6. Then if any arrest of key manager person, senior management, promoter, directors, domestically or internationally, must be reported within 24 hours. Yeah, so we can discuss that question here. Yeah, so change in directors, key manager person. So key manager person as per the Companies Act, and the new introduction of senior management as per the recent amendments, and the auditor and compliance officer. So that those has to be reported. If it is a appointment within 12 hours, in case of resignation, 24 hours.
Correct. So here, so I think the wording is on change. Now, when is the change? So that I think we have to take a little bit of a view there. And also, sometimes what happens, let's say if SMP or a KMP has resigned, and the effective date of that resignation can be futuristic. Obviously, there are notice periods, etc. So it is a futuristic date. But within the time when you have resigned and on the resignation date, things can change and person can change his mind as well, right? And obviously, there will be a negotiation which happens to retain the person, etc. So therefore, it is not yet concrete at that point of time. I think there is an element of acceptance as well, right? So it is the moment if somebody has resigned, there should be an acceptance as well. So I don't know whether that can be the trigger point to say that, okay, now we have accepted and this person has resigned. So probably that can be the starting point to say that, okay, this is the 24 hours clock starts from that point. And I have seen some companies have also taken from the last date. Let's say if a person has resigned on 30th of November, and then from that 30th of November plus 24 hours is what the time starts. I think there's a different practice which has been followed by different people. So that I think you have to, every organization or a compliance officer has to take a call on that. Also, please bear in mind that there is an element of this rumor verification also. So for whatever reason, if you don't disclose it, if it happens to be in the public domain, again, you have an obligation to either confirm or deny. So both aspects you need to buy and look at it, what is correct to do it. And in some cases, it will be very certain that this person is living, so therefore he is living. There is no point of negotiation or etc. So I think those are some of the aspects which you need to take into consideration while making the discussion.
In many cases, once any KMP, particularly, finance or legal or a secretarial, person resign, it is very likely that somewhere, the management negotiate with him and they try to retain him, by matching the expected salary and blah, blah. So, so it means, again, probably I have to go reverse and say, look, he has not resigned, he has withdrawn, blah, blah, something like this. So, yeah. Anyway, you're right, it's more of a subjective.
Somebody has actually asked the question, why would the change in the senior management fee reported 24 hours should not be 12 hours.
Sorry, what was the question?
Why the senior management team related matter to be reported 24 hours? Why not it is in 12 hours? That is the question.
I think the circular says for all the resignations it is 24 hours. And does it say? I'm not very sure.
Yeah, in
Yeah,
circular they
resignation.
have actually said resignation
Yeah,
24 hours. It is
24
mentioned there in
hours.
the circular.
Yes.
Specifically mentioned there.
Yeah.
Probably the reason could be, as you rightly put it, the completeness when you put it actually, when it's the acceptance, then it is emanating from internally, I would presume. If it is a resignation, I would presume externally, because although he is a part of it, but it is his decision. This is not the decision which has come from the company. So in which case, probably they would have made the distinction 24 hours and 12 hours. Probably that could be the thing. That is my thinking.
Yeah, also it is emanating within the company or
Yeah,
outside
yeah.
the company, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So moving forward, so 7A talks about the resignation of the auditor of the listed entity. So the detailed reason for the resignation of auditor as given by the said auditor shall be disclosed by the listed entity to the stock exchange as soon as possible, but not later than 24 hours from receipt of such reason from the auditor. Then there is one important subpoint 7B, independent directors resignation. So if independent directors resigns, so what all things you need to consider? So you have to, if a resignation is given within 7 days of a resignation of independent director, listed entity is obligated to make a specific disclosure to the stock exchange. Though the independent director come under the director part, so that resignation has to be go, but the specific reasoning and along with the resignation letter has to be go within 7 days from the date of resignation. So what should be a comprehensive disclosure? It should be a letter of resignation, so directorship in other entities, confirmation from the independent director, and the confirmation disclosure. So
the question, I think there's a question of when is the 7 days time limit. So the 7 days, the outer time limit is from the change in the SMP or KMP
with
plus
effect.
7 days. Plus 7 days. So if you're doing it ahead of time, I don't think it should be a problem, but that's the outer timeline.
Yeah. So objective behind this disclosure is to facilitate transparency and understanding regarding the circumstances leading to this resignation. And it also ensures the stakeholders are informed of the decision and its rationale behind the resignation. So 7C talks about the resignation of key managerial person. So again, this is aligned with 7B. So the detailed reason of resignation has to be given within 7 days from the date of resignation taking effect. So here they've mentioned resignation not taking effect for a key managerial person. So prompt disclosure ensure transparency. Again, this is objective behind the disclosure of resignation in a descriptive manner. So if managing director or chief executive officer is indisposed or unavailable to fulfill role requirements more than 45 days in any rolling period for 90 days, same along with the reason shall be disclosed to the stock exchange. The time given for this is within 12 hours. So again, share transfer agent, any change in RTA or is discontinuation within 12 hours, you have to report such event. So initiation of resolution plan. So any continual disclosure, any amendments in that event, anything with respect to the resolution plan. So they have given the specific point: integrators agreement, resolution plan finalization, implementation phase, and the silent feature of plan. So those has to be disclosed within 24 hours from the occurrence of event. So if there is a one-time settlement with the bank, then that has to be reported within 24 hours. Again, the winding up petition filed by the party or the creditors, that has to be reported within 24 hours. So in case if there is any issuance of notices, call letters, resolution and circular sent to the shareholders, debenture holders or creditors or class of them, or advertised in media. So along with the advertisement, you have to report to the stock exchange within 12 hours. So any proceedings of annual general meeting or extraordinary general meeting, so those has to be reported within 12 hours. Any amendments to the memorandum or the articles of the listed entity, those has to be reported briefly within 12 hours. So last year this amendment last year this amendment came, the schedule of analyst or institutional investor meet. So you have to prior intimation is there. You have to give the prior intimation of analyst and institutional investor meet. Post earning or quarterly calls, you have to document those audio or video recordings and the transcripts. So recording post earning quarterly calls conducted physically or through digital means must be promptly made available on the website. They should occur before the next trading day or within 24 hours from the conclusion of the call, whichever is earlier. And for transcript of post earning quarterly call should be made available on the website within 5 working days from conclusion of such calls. So subpoint 6 talks about the events relation to CIRP of the listed debtor under insolvency code. So these are the events which are required to be reported within 24 hours from their occurrence. That is the intimation of CRP, financial creditor application, public announcement, creditors list, display, resolution plan, invitation. So these are the events which are required to be reported within 24 hours. So if there is any forensic audit, in case intimation of forensic audit by whatever name called, following disclosure has to be made. These disclosure has to be made to the stock exchange. So if it is initiated by the listed entity, those has to be reported within 12 hours. And if it is initiated by some external agency, those has to be reported within 24 hours. So you have to intimate the fact of the forensic audit and the final forensic audit report other than the forensic audit initiated by a regulatory information agency on receipt of that listed entity. So that has to be uploaded on the stock exchange. So announcement or communication through social media intermediaries or mainstream media by directors, promoters, key managerial person or senior management of a listed entity in relation to any event information which is material for the listed entity in terms of regulation 30 of these regulation and not already made available in public domain by the listed entity. So such communication made by these persons and if clarification required on such announcement or the communication, that has to be reported within 24 hours.
I think there was a question on social media earlier, right? So I think the social media is not included as part of the market rumor definition. The definition of media, mainstream media, doesn't cover social media. So therefore, you don't have an obligation to verify,
that is
confirm
what
or
you
deny.
said initially. And
That
the
is
same
point one. That is point one. Whereas this obligation is a different obligation.
Yeah.
This obligation, let's say if you have communicated anything in from an SMP or a KMP or a directors, if they go and give a media bites or anything, which that information, if it is not made earlier to the public, then there is an obligation of making it to the stock exchanges within 24 hours. And the reason of this is there should be a level playing field of or disseminating the information to everybody, to all the stakeholders. Because if you go and give information only to a part of the stakeholders, then it is not a correct way of doing. So everybody has to know what information you are emanating or disseminating. So that has to be made into the stock exchanges. So that's the difference on the social media front.
Yeah. And in the same question, I think the social media, he also raised another point there. Apart from the social media, he says that information is actually circulated in the larger WhatsApp group. So in that case, what happens?
Doesn't matter. There is no obligation for you to confirm, because again, if it is circulating in the market room on the WhatsApp group, there are so many WhatsApp groups, there are all private channels, right? So how do you know? First of all, you should be part of it.
So anything on a WhatsApp, Instagram, YouTube, all these are to be, doesn't fall into those. Yeah.
On the market rumor communication standpoint, I have to make the distinction. So there are two different parts. As I said, market rumor verification is not, you don't have an obligation if there is a rumor which is floating on the social media. However, if you have made the communication on the social media officially, then you have an obligation to update in the stock exchange. Those are two different obligations.
Okay. Any discussions on a media channel like CNBC and blah blah blah, that is also not to be has to be recorded somewhere, right?
No. So there is no requirement of recording. But if you are discharging an information which is not there in the public domain, you have an obligation to make that disclosure. That is the obligation which is mentioned in this point number 18.
Okay. So sometimes on those stock channel, you have 2-3 people discussing on your company, and they are also making some loose remark about or a good remark or a bad remark. So company is not supposed to take on a record anything, right? I mean, or answer those.
So two different points. One is analysts, investors, brokers, they have the view every time. And that is nothing to do with the company. It is the views of the persons who are providing that or their firms, right? So that is nothing to do with the company, because technically you can't track every analyst what they are saying, and you cannot respond to those. So that's point number one. That's a separate thing. But let's say if your KMPs or directors forming part of the panel and disclosing it in the capacity of the KMP, not in their personal capacity. Okay. But whether it is personal or official capacity, however, if the information is pertaining to the company, which is not there in the public domain, then you have to make a disclosure.
Okay. Yeah, Nikhil.
Yeah. Atul sir, you were asking about the notices received from the regulatory authorities. So if any action initiated or order passed by regulatory, statutory, enforcement authority or judicial body against the listed entity or the directors, key managerial, senior management, promoters, subsidiary in relation to the listed entity is respect of following search or seizure reopening of accounts under section 130, investigation under provision of chapter 14 of Companies Act 2013. So those has to be disclosed within 24 hours. So here, what all information is required in the disclosure is the information about the authority, the name of the regulatory authority, nature of action taken or initiated, date of direction or order, violation, contravention details, if any, and the financial impact or operational impact or other activities, if quantifiable in monetary terms, to the extent possible. So,
I think in your example of that RBI making the
Inspections. Yeah.
inspection, so you
In
need to differentiate or to look into two aspects. One is action initiated. Is it first of all an action initiated, or is it an order passed by any regulatory or statutory? I think RBI is correct. But whether, if you go to the next part of it, whether it is pertaining to search or seizure, reopening of accounts, or investigation under the provisions of Chapter 14. So I think if these three plus if it is an action initiated, then you have an obligation to report.
See, it is a regular phenomena for any NBFC that those RBI comes, they do a lot of inspections, and so they come out with the first observation. It's not that they've laid any penalty or they've concluded anything, and then the company gives the answer. Look, this is what our answer is. Now, my question is, if I'm a company secretary of that company, what stage I should be making it to the public? So because those observations are not yet final.
So we'll go to the next one. Probably that should be clear. Yeah. So please see this.
Yeah.
Nikhil, you want to sum up?
So action taken or order passed by the regulatory, again, it is more related to last one, but the subject matters are much different, and which is more inclusive than the previous regulations. So those are suspension, imposition of fine, penalty, settlement of proceedings, then debarment, disqualification, closure of operations, sanction imposed, warning or caution, any other similar action by whatever name called. So those has to be disclosed within 24 hours.
So it doesn't fall.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't fall, first of all. The second is, it is not an order which has been passed still, and action is still not taken. Because the very fact that they are asking a question to you and you are responding to them means that it is still not concluded anything. They have not framed anything.
Okay.
So it is still the communication is still ongoing. It's like a show cause notice, right? So the show cause notice also, they are asking you, why should I not penalize you, or I should not take an action?
Okay.
I think the example which you mentioned is actually one level before that.
Right.
Somebody has put up a question here. Receipt of the notice for imposition of the fine by BSE and NSE is required to be disclosed under point 20, irrespective of the company is going through for the waiver or fine or not.
So first of all, fines are not required to be disclosed. Sorry, you're saying, sorry, can you repeat the question once again?
Yeah, he says here, receipt of the notice for imposition of fine by BSE and NSE is required to be disclosed under point 20, irrespective company is going for the waiver of fine or not.
Yeah, it has to. It has to be disclosed.
It has to be disclosed. Yeah.
Similarly, other person is asking, in case of the search and seizure, when should we count to 24 hours?
The moment you get the notice.
So once you put that, inward remittance, acknowledgement on that.
Yeah. So the last 21 sub point, which is a voluntary revision of financial statements of the report of Board of Directors of the listed entity under Section 131 of Companies Act. So such a revision has to be reported within 12 hours. So this is para B of part A. So there are total 13 events which needs to be disclosed on the basis of materiality threshold and the both materiality thresholds, which is given under Regulation 30 sub-regulation 4. So any commencement? Yeah.
Nikhil, sorry, before you go there, see, I think on the litigations front, there is also, if you read 3013, there is also a requirement in case if there is a communication which is given by a regulatory authority, that such communication should also be disclosed to the stock exchange. So that's one more thing probably everybody has to take a cognizance.
Okay. Yeah. Should I move?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes.
First, while considering the material threshold, so these events you have to consider. First, the commencement or postponement in the commencement of commercial production or commercial operation of any unit or division. So timeline is given at the right side within 12 hours. So any of the following events pertaining to the listed entity. First is arrangement for strategic, technical, manufacturing or marketing tie-up, adoption of new line of business, closure of operation of any unit, division or subsidiary. So that has to be disclosed within 12 hours. Capacity addition or product launch. So in this sub point 3, if capacity getting added and so you have to consider the projected value. Am I right, sir? The first triggering point will be the first board approves where they are considering the capacity addition and they have the projected values.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So awarding, bagging, receiving amendment or termination of award, back orders, contracts not in normal course of business. So those are required to be reported within 24 hours. Again, the agreement, loan agreement or any other agreement which are binding and not in normal course of business, and revision, amendments or termination thereof. So those has to be reported within 12 hours if for the agreements where listed entity party, and if it is if listed entity is not party, then 24 hours. The disruption of operation of any one or more units or division of the listed entity due to natural calamity, earthquake, flood, fire. So those has to be disclosed within 24 hours.
Okay. Yeah, we can quickly run through.
Yeah. So then again, change in regulatory framework of the listed entity, pendency of any litigation or dispute, fraud, default by employees of the listed entity which has or may impact on the listed entity, option to purchase securities including
So here, see those large operated company which has a multi-state operations and all. Again, company like L&T, I'm just giving that example. So now they have a list of litigations. So now see pendency of any litigation. Now this word any is probably triggering. Any litigations or disputes or outcome thereof. So every time I'm also director in one company where they every board meeting they lay down, look, these are the 35 litigations which are happening, and there are some additions, and there are some deletion also because something has been settled. Now so as a company secretary, because these are all routine in a nature. Maybe I'm having a litigation with the GST department, I'm having a litigation with income tax department or my business the same. So now and so one has to look into those 2%, 12% and all those. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. That's why that if you see, I think
materiality.
33 if you read Regulation 33, it says
Mhm.
that for all the events mentioned in para B,
Mhm.
the thresholds of that is mentioned in 34.
Okay.
So which means that the litigations, if it is crossing the 34, which is 2 to 5%, then it has to be, there should be a disclosure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's on the litigations.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, Nikhil.
Yeah, then again, giving guarantees or indemnity, becoming surety by whatever name called for any third party. So this is also crucial because in day-to-day activity company, the manufacturing company gives guarantee to their vendors and suppliers. So this is also crucial. Then again, granting withdrawal, surrender, cancellation, or suspension of any key licenses or regulatory approvals.
So just a minute. If I have the great people on my board, so the directors, the independent directors, they are also directors in many other companies. Now, some companies, where he is an independent director, made some default or got into some kind of a trouble. So I don't think so. As a company secretary of this company, where I am a company secretary, I'm supposed to even take the note of this and intimate to the stock exchange.
I think there is one provision which says that in relation to the company,
Yeah.
if a fine is imposed, or if anything happens on a direct, but if it is in relation to the company, then it will be disclosed.
In relation to the company, where I'm a director, not to know with respect to.
No, because individually, let's say individually, you may get the income tax notice also. Right, and it can be very substantial as well.
Yeah.
It is right or wrong is a different issue, but potentially it can happen. Right. So therefore, whether you have an obligation to disclose, no, because it is not in relation to the company. There's nothing to do, because if it is impacting anything about the company, then you have to.
Okay, understood. Okay, thank you.
So if there are any delays, default in payment of fine, penalty, dues to any regulatory, statutory, or enforcement judicial authority, and if those are above the materiality threshold, so those has to be disclosed within 12 hours. So this is the para A and para B of part A of schedule 3. So we've discussed regulation along with regulation 30 and regulation 29.
29. Yeah, 29.
And the last para C of part A, any other information, event, major development likely to affect business, any change of accounting policy may have significant impact on the accounts, etc., and brief details thereof, and any other information which is exclusively known to the listed entity, which may necessary to enable the holders of securities of listed entity to appraise its position and to avoid the establishment of false market in such securities. So such events required to be reported by that listed entity.
Yeah. Oh, great. At last it got over.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Very
Nikhil.
good, Nikhil. You have more or less maintained the time. We are closer to 1 o'clock.
I think
We'll just run through the questions, whatever is there, because a couple of questions we already answered, but we'll just run through the questions. I'll just go from the beginning.
Yeah. No, I think there are many questions. Should we spend some time to answer those?
Yeah. Financial, there is no concept of working days, but in the other case, it is 2 working days. Yeah, that is true, because there is 5 days and it is 2 working days. XY influencing the company, that we discussed actually. If there is a regulatory penalty in the regulator on the unlisted material subsidiary, should the listed holding company intimate stock exchange? Should materiality test be applied on the quantum of the fine?
So I'll answer in 2 parts. One is, if you're looking at only from a fines and penalty, Can you go to that slide, Nikhil?
Yeah.
I think it says in relation to the company.
Company secretary of the
Subs
list.
Against the listed entity.
Yeah.
or
And
it's
then in relation to the listed entity.
yeah.
So therefore, one can take a call to find out whether the imposition of the fine on the subsidiary, whether is it in relation to the listed entity or not. Okay, so that is point number one. And point number two, when you are mentioning that material subsidiary, if they have got it, which is material, then obviously under the whatever happens, which is material to your material subsidiary, which has a significant bearing on your company as a listed entity, it has to be disclosed.
Company secretary of the listed company resigned. Please clarify whether we need to report stock exchange within 30 hours. I don't know where from this 30 hours comes. Whether the set vacancy of the CS we can fill through the practicing company secretary, kindly clarify.
I think if you are, as per the Companies Act, if you are in that prescribed sections, prescribed class of companies, then you have to mandatorily have a company secretary. That's one. And then the disclosure has to happen. If there is a resignation, it has to happen within those 24 hours, which we discussed in the beginning. And I think there is also one chat which is briefly, I think the refilling of company secretary position is not 6 months, it is 3 months.
3 months.
Companies Act is 6 months. Now the amended regulations is 3 months.
And here again, he is putting, see, can we fill the vacancy through the practicing company secretary? The question is absurd actually, because we are in the practice, he can never take up an employment.
You can make, but he becomes an employee.
That is right. He'll have to leave the practice, then he'll have to be an employee.
Yeah.
Will you be sharing the presentation to the participants? Of course, it is disseminated through the YouTube. It will be available to all of you.
So all this, recordings are available on YouTube. You can subscribe to our channel so that you can get a regular alerts also. Yeah. So we have our own channel, Mehta and Mehta Advisory something. So you can just always check it up. We always, upload those videos. This, basically this is a platform where we interact, and we try and see that, we clear the doubts, Yeah. Mr. Bala.
If the decision on acquisition is taken by the board, should the stock exchange be intimated in 30-minute toll? I think we discussed elaborately on this. In a matter decided through a circular resolution, that also I think we discussed. How the company can address the compliance risk arising due to the failure of disclosure within the prescribed timeline. What are the consequences of delay filing in the case? Kindly guide.
I think first of all, there is a lot of obligation on the compliance officer, KMPs and the board to make the disclosures. And Nikhil also presented what are some of the scenarios in case if you don't do it, then what can happen is also mentioned. So there should be a risk mitigation strategy for the compliance. So ultimately, this is a compliance risk. So therefore, every company should have a compliance risk mitigating factors which have been imbibed, and there should be enough checks and balances, internal controls built in the system so that you don't get into this situation of non-compliance.
Correct. He has put the consequences. The consequences is going to be penalty. Ultimately, it will be heard, the matter will be decided, and that will be the consequences. He has also given a slide. What is the penalty is going to be there under what act, etc. When is the matter passed to the circular that we have discussed, I think. Then why you change the SFT 24-hour toll, that also we talked about. What will be the time limit for the senior management that the probation period will be covered?
No, so first of all, for the senior management appointment, it has to be taken through the Nomination Remuneration Committee.
Yeah.
Nomination Remuneration Committee has to recommend to the board for an appointment of a senior management. And based on the recommendation of the Nomination Remuneration Committee, the board will approve it. And the disclosure has to happen within 12 hours. So that's the regime. So the probation period, it depends upon when you are determining that person as a senior management person. So probation period should also actually, there are different practices in the market. So if it is if you ask him to join, if you have asked the senior management to join as a CEO -1 or a functional head, so then from the date of joining, he becomes the senior management personnel, and then the disclosure, everything has to happen. And whether it is probation period or not, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, right from the day of appointment. That's
Yes,
right.
yes.
Submission of the resignation letter by a KMP or SMP within 7 days is effective date. Which date you will consider, whether it is the last working day?
Yeah, I think we answered. The outer
That-
limit is last working day plus 7 days.
Yeah, that is what you said actually. In case of the information of the imposition, in case of the information that the indisposition will cross 45 days is made known to the MD only after initial 15 days, so as to leave when this should be disclosed. I'm not very clear what is this.
After 45 days. After 45 days.
Okay.
Or even if it is known that at the time of 15 days, then you have to make it immediately. If the information is known, then it has to be made within 24 hours or within 12 hours, whatever is that case. It has to be done within that period. But if you are not very certain whether he's coming to the office, not coming to the office, or if he's attending to the duties or not, that's why that there is a rolling period of that 90 days, 45 days, etc. Right? So 45 days continuously, if he's not attending the duties in the rolling period of 90 days, then you have to make a disclosure. But if he is certain and if he knows that he's not going to attend for the next 30 days or 45 days, then you have to make the disclosure immediately.
Any communication made by any external party on the company on any market rumor is floating. No need for listed entity to provide the clarification of SP. But if any communication made by the internal source of the company, yeah, this is the comment he has made actually. How do we need to disclose any action taken on the unlisted material subsidy which is not related to the listed entity, that is relating to only subsidiary, whether we need to disclose?
I think we discussed that point.
I think we talked about it. Yeah. Because you said actually this is in relation to the listed entity. Receipt of the notice of the imposition of the BSE, that also I think we discussed. Search seizure, when should be reported, that also we discussed. Late filing fees are not penalties. Is that right?
Yeah, no, late filing fees is not a penalty or a fine.
That also we have discussed.
Also, there are various stages of the orders of the GST authorities and response submitted by the companies. Any guidance on how to deal with it?
You have to disclose. That's the way to deal with it. So there is no shortcut to that because the way it is written today, I understand the practical difficulty, but we don't have much elbow room on the way it is written.
What about the fine and penalty by GST or IT department for the late filing of the return? Is it disclosed as part of that? I think we talked about it. Particularly in a search and seizure case, company staff is not allowed to have access to the phone or laptop for several days. So how to actually compute the 24 hours time limit?
You have to explain. If you are not able to do it, then you have to explain why.
If the exchange sought the financial information, then do we need to provide by email and also need to be disclosed?
So there are two different things. If they are asking an information, let's say in response to an investigation or anything, then that is not required to be disclosed. The disclosure is only as per the Regulation 30 requirements. The whole gamut of disclosures is covered under Regulation 30.
Award bagging, loan agreement and other agreement not in the normal course of the business are required to be reported subject to materiality limits. What is not in the normal course of business?
Yes, that's a good question actually. So what is not normal course of business is something which has to be thought through by every company. I think there is enough guidance under the accounting standards to determine what is normal course of business or not. So one can take a cue from there and try to see. Let's say if you are a shoe manufacturer and if you get a, if the shoe manufacturing is your normal course of business. And if you try and do some other kind of a business, that can be not in a normal course of business.
Somebody has actually put it here. For example, the Infosys backs 1,500 crores worth of infotech project. And let us say 1,500 cases has breached the materiality limits of the Infosys. Can Infosys not disclose a transaction citing that the transaction is in the ordinary course of business as it is your everyday business?
So I think if first of all, I don't want to touch upon the example of Infosys itself, but as a general principle, the law is law. In case if you want to, if it is crossing those thresholds, then you have to make the disclosures. And also, sorry, I'll just complete my thought.
Yeah, sure.
If you see, I was mentioning about the 33 and 34, right, in the beginning. So the 33, the way it is written, it says the thresholds, what is mentioned in 34 is applicable to para B events. Right. So therefore, if it is not in the normal course of business, then for an ordinary course of business, the board or the SMP or the KMP can have their own thresholds under 3012.
Similarly, loan availed not in the ordinary course. How is this to be construed?
Couldn't get that question. Loan
Availed not in the ordinary course. How is this to be construed?
Where is the disclosure triggered? I'm not sure if I'm missing something.
This is a question from Jampunathan. Jampunathan, are you there? Can we hear from you?
But sir, no, if it is not in the, see, all company, when you start a company, normally you have those, clauses in your articles because, they can withdraw, they can borrow.
So am I audible?
Yeah, Abhinav.
So yes, sir. The question was regarding a loan or agreement entered into by the company, which is not in the normal course of business.
What is not in the normal course of business? Why are you taking the loan?
No, for example, let us say Reliance is raising 100 crores as a loan from State Bank of India for its petrochemicals business. So,
It is a normal course of business, no?
Okay, so entirely it has to be different from the normal course of business and not solely on the materiality limits. It can be decided as normal course of business.
No. So for furtherance of, so the reason of borrowing the money is for furtherance of your business. The reason why you went to borrow the money is for taking the, you want to implement it either for working capital purpose or for your expansion. So which is a normal course. It's not a now. It's not a different one, right?
Okay. Similarly, it is for the business. Suppose Reliance is opening one more unit in, let's say, one more fashion unit. Reliance Retail is opening a few stores in some other cities. It need not disclose because it is in the normal course of business.
No. So there you have to apply that materiality, because if you see there is one entry which says that if there is a expansion of your business or even if there is a product launch or anything crosses those thresholds, then you have to make an disclosure.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So the revenues which you expect to cross the thresholds of that with opening of those new shops, then if it crosses those thresholds, you have to make a disclosure.
I think Mr. Bala, we need to close now.
Mr. Jampunathan is sharing his view actually. The amendment is regarding Regulation 30 read with Schedule 3 to attempt towards strengthening the disclosure requirement to the stock exchanges on promoting the information summary and uniformly across the listed entities, uniformly across the industries, which is a great thing. Yet at times, the quantitative threshold in materiality may look minuscule, but at the same time, it may be have an impact on the providing the redundant and relevant information to the stock exchange, which only feature can say. The principle is need to guide the practice of the listed entities so that the information shall be relevant and not redundant. Any guidance on these important words practically? That is what he has expressed his views. Then
I think there are many views and there are many debate which is happening whether the 2 to 5% is correct, whichever is lower is correct or not. I think we will probably that requires another day for discussion, because both the views are different. Every view is a correct view there if you get into that kind of a discussion.
if a NBSC files a check bouncing case against the defaulting customer, is it necessary to disclose its aspect?
If it crosses those thresholds,
Threshold,
because it is your receivables, and probably it is going into a bankruptcy. I mean, it is going into a mode of unavailable to collect, which can be a major default, which will definitely have an impact on your companies or running the operations.
Whether we need to consider show cause notice given by the tax department also for disclosure, or only final order passed by the tax departments.
I think the way it is written, it looks to me it is the order, not at the show cause notice level.
Is it necessary to disclose about the judgment passed by the various courts in relation to the tax dispute, check bouncing cases, etc., and other matters?
Now, again, I will go with the thresholds.
MD KMP resigned. We have 6 directors on the board. We should fill the vacancies within 6 months. I think filling the vacancy is 3 months, I believe. The next board meeting are 3 months, whichever is earlier. Is it necessary? Okay.
Whichever is later, 3 months.
The person may join the company first, but the appointment by the board may happen subsequently as nominated by the NRC. The disclosure will happen after the board meeting. Should we need
Sorry,
to discuss?
I can't understand the question.
The person may join the company first, but appointment by the board may happen subsequently as nominated by NRC. I'm not very clear actually on this.
Maybe for the SMP or the KMP, so it is only after that board appointment. It cannot be before that, right? Because normally you can make an appointment of any person as an employee.
Okay.
Mr. Bala, last question.
Should we need to disclose the event specified in the para A in relation to the unlisted material subsidiary without application of the materiality guideline considering the regulation 39?
Can you go to that, Nikhil? What is 39? Okay, it's material events.
Sir, can I ask?
Okay.
Yes, Santosh.
Loan taken for donation to the political party, can it be called not in the normal course of business?
I would leave it to your judgment.
How can a company take a loan not in the normal course of business, and which bank will give?
Sorry, there was some question on 39, no?
Yeah. Applicability of the materiality threshold, can it be restricted to the financial impact, which is the annual nature, while it is a contract arrangement can be multi-year?
That's a good question. But is that for a contract, tagging of a contract, or what is the? Can you please read once again?
Applicability of the materiality threshold, can it be restricted only to financial impact, which is the annual nature, while the contract or arrangement can be multi-year? He is referring to the contract.
So I need to understand the question a little bit better, because if it is not in the normal course of business, then you have to apply the thresholds. And
you are there?
while you are applying the thresholds, there is no guidance of whether it is a multi-year contract or a per year contract. It has to be one. However,
Valerie Gupta
sorry.
is there. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, Valerie. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm there. Yeah. So, right, it's about the contracts, and even in the normal course of business, the contract or arrangement could be for multi-year. However, the amount may be exceeding the threshold, but when we look at the threshold, the impact has to be on an annual basis, or just because the impact, or let's say the spend on that contract or arrangement over 3 years, 4 years is exceeding materiality threshold, even then the disclosure will be required.
So I think first of all, you need to make a determination whether it is in the normal course of business or the limit specified if it is falling under para B, which is associated with thresholds of 2 to 5%. Then you have to stick to the 2 to 5%. And when you are sticking to the 2 to 5%, then there is no view of whether it is a per year contract, per year value, or a consolidated value over the spread of 4 or 5 years.
Okay, got
right?
it.
So, and also just to continue, but if you believe that it is a normal course of business, then you can go back to 3013, or sorry, 3012, and have a different kind of an approach. And you can have your own thresholds there.
Got it. Thank you.
That is the end of the questions. Nothing else is left over, I think.
Thank you. No,
Sorry. Sir,
Yeah,
I'm unmuted. Can I just ask one question? Sir, yes, sir, please. Mani sir, I just need a practical, answer from company point of view. Actually, there an agreement entered into by the promoters of a listed entity in any of their promoter group entity pertaining to certain loan agreement. But there they are defaulting. However, the listed entity is not being impacting. But when we approach for the loan and the bank says, what is some default, civil defaults are there, whether we should intimate it, I mean, from 5A point of view, any agreement entered into by any promoter group entity, even though directly listed entity is a party or not.
No, so, but where is the impact coming on your entity?
So that is what, if the, particularly if rating of, the rating of that listed entity may have impact with respect to borrowing of the listed entity, because the promoters are, maybe in defaulting in their promoter group entity.
No, are you saying when the rating happens, they also take a consideration of the default by the promoters?
Yes, yes.
Then I think you have to make a disclosure.
So don't you think it is unnecessarily given impact in the...
Yeah, I understand. It is excessive. That's why I was asking a question of where is the impact coming?
May have impact. That is what I'm saying. It may have an impact that our rating may be impacted, but I'm not sure.
That
Every
has
time...
to be ascertained. That has to be ascertained, right? Because if you otherwise you need to take a call. It's a commercial call. I don't think it is. It can be addressed on a from a legal standpoint, because first of all, you need to ascertain whether that has a bearing impact on your company's rating or not. If it is there, definitely you have to make a disclosure. If not, then you can take a call.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Somebody put one more question now. If a NPSC is having an investment portfolio of rupees 10 crores and the loan portfolio of rupees 1 crore, and if the customer defaults, to whom loan amount of 0.15 lakhs outstanding, how to calculate the threshold?
Which threshold? Zero outstanding, I don't think it is coming. So if you see the way it is, I think the circular, 13 circular, you are explaining, Namrata?
Hello. Yeah, hi,
Yeah.
it's Yash from Yash here. I need to understand if any event which is covered in the para A and which is triggered in unlisted material subsidiary, shall the listed entity needs to disclose irrespective of applying the quantum of materiality? That should be read in along with the regulation 30 sub-regulation 9.
Yeah. If it is material to your company, then definitely yes, you have to make the disclosure.
The event is pertaining to unlisted material subsidiary also.
Yes, because the impact is there on your
Yeah, impact is
Yeah,
coming on.
consolidation. Impact was there on consolidation.
Yeah. Sorry, I think there was one more question, no? Previous one. I thought the question was pertaining to that.
Yes, sir, that was raised by me.
I think Bala sir is asking.
Yeah, this was that NBSC. He is asking about the outstanding amount he is asking. I don't know. Yeah, NPSC having an investment portfolio of 10 crores and a loan portfolio of 1 crore, and the customer defaults to whom loan amount 0.15 lakhs is outstanding. How to calculate the threshold?
I am not sure I understood the question. But if you are referring to the thresholds which is mentioned about 2 to 5%, which is mentioned under 30 subsection 34, then I think one has to take a note of the circular of July 13, 2023. There they have given a methodology of how you have to calculate. The 2% turnover, 2% revenue, 2% turnover and 2% net worth is straightforward. But how do you calculate the 5% profit is something which has been given explicitly. And it also goes back to say that if it is a plus or minus number, then you have to ignore that.
I think I am done with.
Yeah. So thank you, Mr. Mani. It was very detailed presentations, and that's what we are running a master class on this, because now when you talk about only LODR and just finished in 2 hours, which is totally impracticable. So thank you once again being a part of this platform, and I think you have covered almost all the questions. And thank you, Mr.
Atul, Valerie Gupta wants to ask one last question.
Oh, Bapare Bap. If Mr. Mani is ready, then we can.
Yes,
now.
Valerie.
Yes, thank you, sir. I had put this on chat. So one just last quick question. Para B, there is requirement of disclosure of strategic marketing technical tie-ups. Obviously, there is a materiality threshold. It will also be looked at from the ordinary course of business. But from the circular by SEBI, it seems more like these kind of tie-ups in terms of a JV or in terms of acquisition of stake in another company would be considered more as disclosure required, and not really those kind of transactions which a company may have with suppliers or vendors or customers, which could be in the nature of, say, technical tie-up or so. Your views, please.
Oh, so there are 2 different points. What you mentioned is absolutely correct. I think many times we get carried away with all the strategic partnership, joint venture, etc. Right? Those kind of terminologies and words. So one is, if you definitely enter into a joint venture, there is no doubt you have to make the disclosure. And second, if you enter into this kind of a relationship agreements with the vendors or or your customers, that if you think that it is a material, it has an impact on materiality and crosses those thresholds, then you have to make a disclosure. Let's say you go and enter into a multi-year contract with either your vendor or your supplier to say that you are either purchasing or selling the goods, and it can cross those thresholds, then you have to make that disclosure. I don't see an exemption.
Right, but here again, sir, the contract may be multi-year, and the impact may have to be looked at annually, because over the period it can be a huge amount. But since the threshold is year on year, should we look at the impact also year on year?
No, that is no. Your argument is right, but unfortunately, that's not the way it is written. Also, that is why I was saying 30. You have to distinguish between whether it is para B event or it is 3012 event. I think that's very important. Once you do that, under 3012, you have a discretion. You can take your own view whether it is an annual contract value or a total contract value. It's called actually ACV, TCV in those terminologies. You can take a call on that. But if it is falling into para B event doesn't give you any elbow, because Nikhil, can you put that slide of 34 thresholds, quantitative thresholds? because the way it is mentioned of the 2 to 5%, it doesn't give you to take an interpretation that you can actually take a view of per year. Not this one. 30 subsection 4, quantitative and qualitative thresholds. Yeah, this one. Please see on the right hand side, it says the omission of an event or information whose value or the expected impact. So it is not saying anywhere annual. Value means full consideration.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Mani. Many thanks. Actually, I'm enriched to a greater extent today for the ongoing learning.
Yes,
And thank you very much for the extended time you are kindly given to us actually. And again, Nikhil has given an excellent presentation, putting up everything together in the very concise form. Done a very good thing. My appreciation to Nikhil as well. Atul, your last words.
Thank you.
Thank you, Atul. Sorry, before Atul, thanks a lot to all the participants. I think I was not expecting so many questions. Very thrilled to see so many questions and participants coming in. So thanks to each one of you. I think in the process, it has actually pushed me to learn. I think a few of the questions were thought-provoking. I may have to go and refer my Bhagavad Gita once again. So I will definitely do that. Thanks, Atul, and to your firm for giving me such a great opportunity. It's a privilege and honor to be here. Thanks, Professor Bala. I think I have a half experience of you, and the way you bring your enthusiasm and to the point, it's amazing. So it was a great learning for me. And Nikhil, a very sharp presentation. Thanks a lot for bringing it up. Thank you, everyone.
Mani, one thing is there, even at the close hours of 1:30, we have closer to 100 people still there. Normally, any session, we see very meager amount of the attendance at the end. Now, that itself shows the importance of the topic and the importance of, the essence of the discussion what we have.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mani. We definitely will bother you once again, maybe some other topic, but it's more of a CSR for our individual thing. And this is
PSR. It is called PSR, Professional Social Responsibility.
PSR, right? So giving back to the society, that's what we have learned in last 1.5 years. And Mr. Bala is always so enthused. Whenever you ask him, all Saturday he's comes with the same enthused. Thank you, Mr. Bala, gracing this occasion, and Nikhil, our young partner. So you've done a wonderful job. Thank you, Mr. Mani, once again, and look forward in the future also, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all participants. And this gives a lot of encouragement, and you can always subscribe to YouTube channel where you will get, once we upload this, the discussions, it will be live, in 2-3 days. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot all. Wish you a good weekend. Let us meet next week again in yet another topic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.